Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today I am joined by my co-host Bryan Smith. Bryan, how's it going, buddy?
It's going good. We're chatting between the two ends of the doubleheader today, and the Cubs laid an egg in the first one, so hopefully a better evening after we record this.
The current status of me as a Chicago Cubs fan is that I've been digging in real deep into the Illini football schedule this fall, and so that's when it's time times are getting rough in Chicago for the old ball club.
Yeah, absolutely. I had to go back and watch Tyler Schlafer start from this weekend in Double A just to find something good that happened to give myself some happiness. So I didn't even watch the last two
Dude,
innings.
Schlafer keeps looking good, man. We don't have him. We're not chatting about him today, but he keeps looking good. You
He
mentioned him last episode. You're like, let's get him up to Iowa as kind of sign of good faith for some what successor contract deal going into next year. But I don't know, he's just looking really good.
We're gonna have to find a time to talk about him, I think, because I think that there's even like a 40-man case starting to get put together here.
Yeah, which is wild.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Imagine saying that this time last year.
Yeah, could
Crazy.
not
Well, I
imagine. I
mean,
mean,
we could have had that conversation this time last year because he was 40-man or he was Rule
Rule
5
5.
eligible last year, and
That's true, yeah.
his name didn't even remotely come up in conversations. So that's fun.
Yeah, and it was one
Um,
of those games where he was pitching against on a away team broadcast, and the other announcers were just like they were in love with him. And you always love when that happens because you see, the perspective from different sides.
yeah, that actually makes me like. I like doing that. I love the Cubs affiliate broadcasters. They're all terrific, obviously, and having that familiarity when you're tuning in those broadcasts is awesome. But when you get a player that catches the away broadcaster's eye, like it makes me kind of do a second, like a double take on a player, especially a guy. I mean, Schlafer caught my eye already up to this point, but if it's like a reliever, for example, because I'm not paying like
Yeah.
super close attention to a relievers throughout the season outside of looking at their numbers and box scores and things. And so if I can get an away broadcast and they say, wow, like this reliever is really catching my eye, it's like, oh, well, maybe I should pay a little bit closer attention. So yeah, that is always a fun thing is with those away broadcasts. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into what we're talking about today. We've got kind of a few different topics on the episode. We're going to hit Owen Caissie and his promotion to Chicago, talk about that from a Cubs perspective, but also a prospect perspective with Owen Caissie to lead off this show. I did some digging. I made a thread over on Blue Sky and Twitter this past week about top 100 prospects and who the Cubs have left and who might be up next. So we're going to talk about that a little bit this episode, and then we have some three different topics based on listener questions that we're going to address towards the back end of this episode. One is pitching prospects that could impact Chicago in 2026. One is hitters that we could see making a giant leap over the next calendar year or so. And then the third topic is pitching prospects that we like the most in the lower minors, both in Myrtle Beach and South Bend. So we'll get into those topics at the end. But like I said, let's talk about Owen Caissie first,
Yeah.
because that's the news. Honestly, that's the most fun news in the entire organization, including the major league team, because obviously the major league team hasn't been very good. We saw Owen Caissie make his debut this past week in Toronto, got called up, got to the ballpark like an hour and a half before first pitch, was in the lineup that day, ended up going 0 for 4 after being robbed of who was it? Davis Schneider in left
Yeah.
field for the Blue
What a
Jays
catch.
clearly did not get the memo on what was going on with Owen Caissie making his debut essentially in his hometown in Toronto. Made a diving catch in left field, and then Owen Caissie turned around, or Craig Counsell turned around, didn't start Owen Caissie for the entire series against Pittsburgh. He got one pinch hit opportunity, and then started game one of the doubleheader on what is today, Monday, back at home against Milwaukee. So,
And
uh,
and I want to point out got his first hit, so he got
yes,
the monkey off the back this afternoon. So that's
yes,
a good thing.
and the first hit was pretty appropriate, right? Him taking a hard hit line drive to left field was the only way that Owen Caissie knew how to do it, right?
Right.
So what's I guess what's your takeaway of the Cubs calling up Owen Caissie? How do you view him as a prospect, as a major league player? What do you want to talk about with him?
Yeah, I mean, one thing we talked about some of these guys getting called up is that it was going to take an injury that to make it happen. And while it sort of did in this case, the Miguel Amaya, um, really unfortunate tumble on first base sort of led to Casey getting called up, but not really. I mean, to me, it's just the extreme slump that the outfielders are in, and so Casey's kind of coming into this, I'd imagine, a clubhouse that's pretty frustrated with an outfield group that all knows that every day he's going to play means one of them is not, and they're all sort of fighting through it together. It has to be a pretty strange context for a player to walk into, and I don't know whether that helps or hurts in the long run. I don't really have a strong feeling about it, but just I have to imagine coming into this team at this time, specifically into the outfield group, is pretty weird.
Imagine Owen Caissie getting his first taste of Wrigley Field, which is one of the best places for any player to play, and he's playing alongside Kyle Tucker, who's Kyle Tucker for the past however many years has been one of the best outfielders in all of Major League Baseball, and he comes to Wrigley Field and he's listening to the Wrigley Field crowd boo Kyle Tucker on a daily basis. And it's like that's weird, man.
Yeah.
That's not typical. That's not normal. Just strange circumstances, and the status of the team that's kind of not kind of that's really struggling, and so that can't be easy. It can't be easy for him to perform. I We already kind of addressed the fact that his adjustment to the major leagues was going to be rough, right? We thought about Owen Caissie and comparing him to Matt Shaw, and Matt Shaw making his debut earlier this year. We kind of viewed Matt Shaw as a guy that would adjust pretty seamlessly to the major leagues. Like we talked about that last offseason. We're like, Matt Shaw's gonna be just fine. Like he may slump a little bit, but like his slumps will be like just below league average. It's like he slumped bad, and he was like the slump proof type of guy reaching the major leagues. Now Owen Caissie is a guy that we view as really gonna have to adjust in a big major way to major league pitching, and so yeah, just a weird circumstance all around. But obviously, the strikeouts he's had quite a few strikeouts over the first few games that he's played, but also hitting the ball hard when he makes contact, and so that's kind of Owen Caissie, man. That's what we've grown accustomed to. I posted a clip. We had a conversation. This was probably about a month back or so. You and I, when we were talking about who is the next number one prospect in the Cubs organization. This was after Cade Horton and Matt Shaw had graduated, and we were talking about Ballesteros and Cade and Owen Caissie and Jefferson Rojas and Jackson Wiggins, and we talked about Caissie, and we talked about how the prospect fatigue was very real with him. This was prior to the trade deadline. You had mentioned that it felt like Cubs fans wanted to trade him just because of the prospect fatigue. I
Yeah.
posted a clip on social media a couple days ago of me talking about how the weird thing with Owen Caissie is that Major League fans who had never seen him play once kind of knew everything there was to know about Owen Caissie just as much as you and I did, based on how he performed in the minor leagues over the past 5 years. So good to finally have him in the majors. I think obviously the circumstances have warranted him being called up, but like he absolutely went out there and earned every bit of that promotion up to the majors, like every bit of it. The fact that he's been killing the ball this year, the fact that he's putting up numbers and he's gotten better. We talked about how he's been a similar player over the course of his entire career. Well, the exception has been over the last 2 months or so as he's
Right.
watched that strikeout rate really plummet while the power has stayed present. And so that's super fun.
Yeah, if I remember that conversation right about the prospect fatigue, it was in, I think it was in late June, sort of when this hot streak was just really beginning, not
Yep.
knowing if it was, not knowing how long it was going to sustain. It basically sustained itself for 6 weeks, and almost it was like his prospect fatigue got usurped by the fatigue that Cubs fans have with this current outfield and watching their at bats right now. And so then you oscillate the other way where now you're the great hope. Now you're the guy that everyone wants called up because, this offense needs something to fix itself. And, I think we know that that Owen's got plenty of struggles in him probably out of the gates here. So, I don't see him as like some big hope. Now, is there a chance that he just catches a heater and finds, 5 homers in 12 games or something? Totally. But I thought today's strikeout, he struck out with the bases loaded and 1 out today against Freddie Peralta, and it was like, that was a spot where Wrigley's on its feet. Huge moment where the coolest thing that can happen is the prospect coming through in a big spot. But the real life, what really happens in the real world is the guy strikes out because he's facing a pitcher who can, throw 90-mile-per-hour changeups like just off the plate. And that's not something you see in AAA.
We got a question from Adam Kirshner on social media, and I wanted to kind of call that out. We were already planning on talking about Owen Caissie, but his question relates to Owen Caissie a lot, kind of asking about navigating a call up, navigating a promotion, and balancing the idea that Owen Caissie is a top prospect, not only in the Cubs organization, but a top 50-ish prospect in all of baseball. So he's like a legit guy,
Yeah.
but he's being called up to be the 25th, 26th man on the roster. Like he's not being called up to bat in the middle of the order on a daily basis for the Chicago Cubs in a playoff crunch. Add in the stress of that playoff push that the Cubs are in the midst of, trying to desperately trying to maintain a wild card spot, losing grip of the division from the Milwaukee Brewers. Like, what does a prospect like Owen Caissie? I'll kick it to you first. What does a prospect like Owen Caissie get out of this experience? Like, what is that? What is this? How does this experience differ for him versus maybe Matt Shaw at the beginning of the year, or a prospect that comes up? We saw Samuel Basallo just called up for the Baltimore Orioles a couple days ago. And so, like, he's obviously a top prospect as well, but
Right.
he's going to the Orioles, who are struggling. They are not good. They're not in a playoff contention. How do you balance that, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to do it with communication in the organization. And what I hope that they told Owen is, this is a 2 week opportunity. We're playing a ton of games in a very short amount of time. We see a world where each of our outfielders will benefit from 2 days off over the next 2 weeks. And you're not gonna play every day, but you're gonna probably play about half the time or a little more. And what I would tell him is we're going to call you down no matter what. So
Yeah.
like this is a chance to be an infusion of energy with the team, learn a little bit, help where you can, and there's no pressure because no matter what happens, you're back in Iowa. And there's something to be said for a losing team that calls up a top prospect and just says, "Hey, we also don't care if you stink, but like we're going to give you 50, 100 games here and like, you're just going to learn your way through it." This is a little different. This is more like we're going to put you in some nerve wracking spots, but also you're not the sixth most important hitter on this team. You're not
Mm.
even the ninth most important hitter on this team. So everything you give us is gravy. Soak it up for 2 weeks and then go back and really earn the spot this offseason.
From everything I've heard, Owen Caissie is just a tremendous dude, and I think that you have to be able to know your players. You have to be able to know the guy that you're communicating to in
Yeah.
order to get that message across, and
Yep.
believe that he will take it in the right way. Because if there's certain people, and I like to think that I would be the guy that if I heard that, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'll contribute in any way. That'd be awesome. And like, yeah, I think I'd be that way. But would also hear somebody telling me that like I'm going to back to Iowa no matter what, and that would kind of suck. Like
Right.
hearing, oh, if I put up a 900 OPS over the next 3 weeks, doesn't matter, you're still getting sent back down. Like that's a rough thing to hear from your manager or your general manager, or whoever it might be. And so, yeah, I'm sure that Owen takes it in stride and loves every second of these next few weeks. But that's probably not an easy thing to handle, man. Like, it's a difficult thing to grapple with.
I mean, there had to be some bit of that for him when the Cubs traded for Kyle Tucker. I mean,
Yeah,
you're talking, they traded for a guy who plays right field and is a lefty power hitter and to fill a gap, and they said when they traded for him, like, we hope to sign him to a long-term contract. Like, if you're in Owen's spot, you saw that happening and you thought, wait, I thought that was the position that I was growing into for this organization. So, I think that there's some of that just like that comes with being a prospect, for particularly when you play for one in a big market, and even more so when they're in a competitive part of the cycle. So, yeah, I mean, one thing I really want to look at maybe this offseason is when I think about some Cubs prospects that have been called up recently. whether it's it's Matt Shaw, maybe even going back to like Matt Mervis. The thing that I've been noticing the most is just how the majors challenges your plate approach and how easy it is for young guys to get caught in between swing decisions like constantly. And I felt like that strikeout today with the bases loaded, Owen was right there. I mean, he didn't see one ball in the strike zone, and it felt like he had a check swing strikeout earlier in the game as well. Just like not quite committing. And what I'd love to do is go back and look at guys from other organizations that I'm less familiar with and say, like, who are the guys that have been able to just sustain their plate approach right away? And I wonder if there's some commonality, because that is something I think the Cubs organization could be better at, probably, is just like getting a little quicker with getting these guys acclimated to the big leagues, not necessarily personality wise, but particularly with their plate approach.
Yeah, that's a really good call. I can't imagine a lot of dudes do it
Probably
super
not
smoothly.
many. Yeah,
I bet it's a very, very select few. But I think what I'm more curious about what you just described is not necessarily like how many, but like which ones. Because
exactly.
I can't imagine it's like, oh, if you're it's all the top prospects. There's five guys that have done it well over the past 2 seasons, and the five guys have all been the top prospects in all of baseball. Like I bet
Right.
there's some dudes that are unranked prospects, and some guys that are the
Uh,
top in their organization. Like I don't know.
I mean, it seems like something Milwaukee Brewers certainly do pretty well. I mean, they have guys come up, and I feel like they're put like Caleb Durbin is a guy whose plate approach has really translated to the big leagues. Even like, going with an ex-Cub, like Cam Smith has had plenty of struggles this year, but I felt like the first month he was in Houston, he was pretty true to like the plate approach guy that we knew. I mean, he didn't walk quite as much. That's probably never going to happen, but he was having pretty confident swings, I feel like. That's probably waned a little recently. He's had a summer slump, but yeah, it's just something to look at. And I'm not saying Casey's there. I mean, he's had a couple at bats that have looked a little funny, but we're still in like the single number of at bats range. So we'll see how it looks in the next 10 days. Hopefully he starts sort of contributing by drawing walks like he always has. And then I have no doubt that he's going to find a couple balls to hit pretty far.
Agreed. All right, let's transition to top 100 prospects because I with Owen Caissie getting called up to the majors and Moises Ballesteros having played the majors earlier this season, the Cubs are down to just two, and Kevin Alcantara getting in last season. The Cubs are down to just two players that are considered by some outlets to be top 100 prospects in all of baseball that have not yet made their major league debut. That's Jefferson Rojas and Jackson Wiggins. And so, in looking at that, I kind of turned my attention to, is there anybody in the organization who could be next? Is there anybody that can do it in the next calendar year? And so I'll probably, instead of framing this as by this time next year or by the midseason prospect list next year, maybe it's by the end of next season, like next season's off season prospect ranking kind of timeline.
Right.
Who in this Cubs system can be a top 100 prospect? Because I think there's a pretty big fall off after Jackson Wiggins and Jefferson Rojas in terms of guys that could potentially be those top 100 guys. I've got my thoughts on some dudes, but I'll kind of kick it to you first for kind of your thinking behind all this.
Yeah, I mean it's a little tricky because a lot of the guys that follow up the sort of current top 100 in the rankings are guys that are in AAA that
Hmm.
those guys tend not to move up ranking lists. Like James Triantos getting back on will be hard. Brandon Birdsell breaking through will be hard. Even Johnny Long, if he continues to do it, maybe he could be like the 95th prospect at some point, but I sort of doubt it. So I would turn to like pure upside and look at somebody like Josiah Hartshorn.
Okay.
If he got assigned to Myrtle Beach next year and looked like a guy who people are saying, oh, he should have been a first rounder last year. And there's a pretty quick path for guys in low A that are 7-figure bonus guys to assert themselves as that kind of prospect. So he would jump out first and foremost. Who would you have as the favorite on that list?
Yeah. So when I initially was looking at this from the standpoint of like midseason next year, I kind of ruled out Ethan Conrad right? Because Ethan Conrad, your mind kind of wanders to the first round draft pick from this year right away. But with
Right.
Ethan Conrad, it's tricky because he's not going to play this season, and so you're running low on the number of plate appearances he's going to get before those midseason rankings come out next year. If we're talking by the end of next year, then I think he has a decent shot, and probably I'd say probably in my opinion the highest likelihood of being a top 100 prospect by
Yeah.
the end of next year. By
Yeah, I
the
think that's
middle of
right.
next year, I think absolutely not. Ranking a guy in a mid-season ranking after what he play 75 to
I,
90-ish games, right?
I don't
Before the
know. I could see him doing it if he has a hot start. I mean, I don't know how many guys Baseball America or something like that threw right from the draft into their top 100, but I feel like it's usually about 8 or 10 or so.
yeah.
And so, being one of those next 10 guys when we have the initial round of prospects that lose eligibility next year, if he has a good 2 months, I could definitely see it.
I do like your Josiah Hartshorn pick though as well. I honestly hadn't considered him as much, but I think that you're right. If a high school draft pick that's a switch hitter and a guy that has a whole lot of power can uh, get assigned out the gate next year to Myrtle Beach as a high school pick from the previous year, that's a big ask. Like that's a big ask by itself. But if he can come out and start performing well in Myrtle Beach right away, then yeah, maybe he's a guy that catches a lot of helium early on, and we see kind of that Zaire Hope type of rise up into a top 100 prospect. The
The
the other
Cubs don't
guy,
really do this, but I feel like other organizations are, you can call it good at or whatever, like playing the prospect list game a lot
hmm,
more than the Cubs. And so with a guy like Josiah, like if the Cubs made really loud noise next spring training, like, oh my gosh, would the standout of our camp is this kid, and can't believe we got him where we did in the draft, and certainly had a few birdies like talk in the right ears of big prospect writers and say, like, best player in Arizona I've seen, said one unnamed executive, his heart story, and like that kind of stuff actually sort of matters, I think, when you're talking about guys getting sort of breaking into the list. And like, so a team like the San Diego Padres, they play that game. They believe there's value in that. The Cubs are the literal opposite end of that scale. They do not play that game one little bit. And so that probably hurts a guy like him, like getting that far into the top 100, is just not having that level of sort of organizational juice to the mainstream media. But it is there if they ever find value in it, because I do think it sort of works.
well, I mean, Galaxy Brain here. If the Cubs come out next spring training and are hyping up their guy like you just described, then the folks Jim Callis and Jonathan Mayo at MLB Pipeline, the folks at Baseball America, like they'll be shocked that
Yeah,
the Chicago Cubs of all teams are hyping up their prospects in this way, and they're going to be like, "Wow, like
he
Josiah
must be
Hartshorn
good.
really he must be great." And so not only will he be a top 100 prospect, he'll be a top 20 prospect by by midseason next year. No, I do think the tricky thing with all Cubs prospects when they're first hitting the organization is that first stop is Myrtle Beach, man,
Yeah,
and with hitters obviously, and for a hitter to come out and start off hot hitting at Myrtle Beach, it just doesn't really happen. Like it could actually be good production, but if you're anybody from the outside of the Cubs organization looking
right,
at Josiah Hartshorn putting up a 750 OPS in Myrtle Beach, we would be looking at that and be like, holy cow, like this kid's amazing. Anybody
right.
else would be like, oh, 750 OPS, like, oh, that's fine, whatever. Like, but I'm not gonna rank them.
Yeah.
Um, so that gets tricky. The two guys you mentioned, James Triantos and Jonathan Long, caught my eye, but I want to kind of point them out. I think that James Triantos actually has it's weird, right? I think he has one of the better opportunities to jump into a top 100 of anybody else in the organization outside of Conrad and Hartshorn potentially, because he's already been on a top 100 ranking before.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's already been there. And so I know he's in AAA, but he's still what 21 or 20, I guess 22 to 21, 22 years old. If he gets off if he ends the season on a strong note,
And
gets
playing a
added to
little
the
better
40-man
lately,
roster.
I
He
feel
has been
like.
playing better. if he gets added to the 40-man roster and then comes out hot in 2026 in Iowa, then there's already the precedent that he had been a top 100 prospect, and the narrative of like he's putting it back all together could really hit, and he'd be added to the top 100 list. Johnny Long is it's weird. I don't see Johnny Long being a top 100 guy. The only scenario I do is that so my vision with Johnny Long is that he needs to perform even a little bit better than he already is. He's been absolutely tremendous this season and last
Yeah.
season, but like this season has been potentially Cubs minor league hitter of the year.
Yeah.
But he needs to go even that next level up in order to be a top 100 prospect. And I think if he goes that next level up in terms of production, he's going to be in Chicago, and then he's not going to be a prospect anymore, and he
Right.
won't be on a top 100 list. And so the only scenario where I do see him being added is if he has already made it like midseason into the majors next year, and he still has prospect eligibility. And somebody's like, let me just sneak him into this top 100 to like because he's already made it. Like let me sneak
Yeah.
him in here in case he does really take off in the majors or something like that. So, but outside of these, what four guys, Hartshorn, Conrad, Triantos, and Long, like I don't really see a clear path in the next year. You kind of mentioned the higher upside guys, maybe some of those international free agent signings that are down in the complex league right now, but they've got to take off an incredible amount to be a top
Yeah, I
100
mean,
prospect
maybe
between
like,
now and then.
Christian Hernandez jumped on the MLB.com list that on their midseason update up to, I think he's a top 10 prospect for them now, which is where I have him too. If he got to double A and had the power breakout out of the gate next year, that I think, we think he's sort of capable of just based on sort of batting practice and things like that. He has this sort of like long established juice as like got the big bonus and stuff that there's a pathway, but like now we're getting into a tier of players where it's like very dependent on a breakout that sort of is outsized from where we think they are right now. And then you could probably, I mean, you could put a bunch of players
Yeah.
if we're just sort of tossing out like, well, if they get every hitter they face out for the first 2 months, but he would sort of be the next one on the list. Like I can see it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, like, yeah, Angel Cepeda
Yeah.
is a guy that had a lot of hype, and
Yeah.
he's not doing well in Myrtle Beach, but maybe he does well in South Bend next year and like puts it
Right.
all together. Yeah, it's I, to me, it's that Conrad Hartshorn, then James Triantos, then way down is Long, and then way down is everybody else. I think that like
Yeah.
I for what it's worth, right here, like I don't think that any Cubs prospect outside of Wiggins or Rojas will be in a top 100 this time next year or even next offseason. I don't think it's going to happen.
Ne- Conrad Conrad next offseason I would say like should. If he's not, then I don't know, maybe 2026 didn't go that well. Like if 2026 goes moderately well with all the graduations you see and stuff, a guy who was a top 20 pick in the draft should be there. So I'm going to say I think he would have better than 50% odds to next offseason. Outside of him, I don't know that there's anyone who even has maybe 20-25% odds.
Yeah. All right. You want to get into some of these listener questions here?
Yeah.
So the first question is about pitching prospects. It's a question from Matt Reynolds asking which pitching prospects can help the team in 2026, which I got the question. I was like, oh, I'm going to be able to rattle off all these different guys. And then I started digging a little bit deeper, and my answers got a little bit more difficult than I expected it to be. I think the name off the top of my head that I came up with obviously is Jackson Wiggins. We don't know, dude. I don't know. I don't know what's going on as far as Jackson Wiggins pitching in games this year in minor league baseball. I don't get it. I don't know. I've heard that he might be throwing bullpens. He might not. I don't know what's going on with Wiggins.
Yeah.
That's the most common question I get. I don't know the answer to it. Regardless of if he plays or not the rest of the season in the minors, Jackson Wiggins is the most impactful pitching prospect that could debut and help the team in Chicago in 2026, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a guy who can like sort of break through and sustain a starting role, I would say he's probably the only one. There are guys that we can talk about that are the type of guys that I could see coming up and replacing someone who gets injured, and maybe getting 3-4 starts, and then we see how it goes or whatever. But um, somebody who the Cubs sort of will have earmarked in their plans as like, we have to leave open the possibility that this guy busts the door down. Jackson's definitely the big one.
I think after Jackson Wiggins, if you're talking starting pitchers, it gets a little trickier. Brandon Birdsell, obviously, I guess not obviously, we didn't talk about it last week. Brandon Birdsell went down with an injury last week, the week before, and he will be on the shelf for the rest of this season. And we're unsure about what the injury timeline looks like going into next year. And so he's just kind of the big question mark here.
Yeah.
He's Rule 5 eligible this offseason. And so adding him to the 40-man roster seemed like a no doubt, like that's going to happen. Even with the injury earlier this season, like it seemed like, of course, Brandon Birdsell, top 10 pitching prospect in the Cubs organization, Cubs minor league pitcher of the year in 2024, he will be added to the 40-man roster. Depending on what this injury is and how much time he's going to miss next year, that becomes more of a question mark, obviously. So he's kind of the wild card of this bunch, and I don't want to say yes, look out for Brandon Birdsell, or don't look out for Brandon Birdsell next year. Just kind of at this point to be determined. But the two other guys that are worth throwing out here are two guys that are in the AAA rotation right now. That's Will Sanders and Connor Noland. Will Sanders is a top 15-ish prospect in the Cubs organization. Connor Noland a top 30-ish, top 35-ish prospect in the Cubs organization. Probably taking on different roles in Chicago. I think you're expecting you're hoping for a little bit more out of Will Sanders going into 2026 in terms of like I picture Connor Noland more as a depth starter, kind of bouncing back and forth between Iowa and the major leagues, and I think you're hoping to really fill a spot for a few weeks with Will Sanders more than Connor Noland. But those two pitchers are very similar, dude. Like if you look
Yeah.
at the numbers for both those guys, and not only the typical like the ERA and strikeout percentage and walk percentage, but like the under the hood numbers are just very similar with Will Sanders and Connor Noland.
Yeah, I mean those guys I think probably need one pitch to really take off this offseason to sort of insert themselves onto the radar. The next two that jump to mind are Tyler Schlaver, who we talked about at the start of the show, and Grant Kipp, the kind of two prospect D types best performing in AA. I think Schlafer really has an up arrow right now. Kipp's up arrow was more towards the beginning of the season, but two guys that have added velocity, have shown pitches that have really helped, sort of secondary pitches that have taken a step forward in the last year. So those are guys that, they still have the ability to get to AAA and to sort of make make a name for themselves at Iowa, like quickly in a way that, Noland and Sanders are so established in AAA that I feel like they get to be sort of pigeonholed into known commodities a little more.
Mm-hmm.
Where, if Schlafer or Kipp got to Iowa and ran off on a hot streak, like that becomes a way to propel yourself forward much easier, I think. So those two guys, I think, if we're talking starters, those are the next two.
I think we're talking the Craig Counsell outgetters, right? I mean, like outside of Jackson
Yeah.
Wiggins, who's like, all right, he's your top prospect. Like you want him to be a starting pitcher in 2026. Outside of that, like Will Sanders and Connor Noland, depth guys, like outgetters in Chicago.
Yeah.
Tyler Schlaper, Grant Kipp, guys like that are more outgetters. Like we don't know, are they going to be a starter? Are they going to be a multi-inning reliever? Are they going to convert them to the bullpen and see how that works in Chicago? I don't know, right? Like it's those are just outgetter guys, and we'll have to
I mean,
see kind of how they treat them.
If Grant Kipp lowered his arm slot just a little bit more, and they like
Mm-hmm.
tried him in relief, and by trying him in relief, maybe he could get up to 97, and we know he can spin it really well. So maybe those breaking balls, like there is I could see a scenario where Grant Kipp sort of took off in a 2 inning role or something
Yeah,
like that. He
I dig
might
it.
be, of those guys, he might be the one that I can see the most, because you can gimmick him a little easier by just sort of lowering that slot. I think it's already, fairly low, but you could probably go even lower, and then like maybe there's a deception thing that sort of takes off.
our favorite game, you get to mention a few. We get to mention a few relievers to keep an eye on.
They're not, it's not as flush as it often is. Like, there are guys that are getting a lot of outs in Knoxville. Like the Knoxville bullpen is pretty successful this
Yeah.
season. But they don't, I find myself having a harder time selling them as major league options than I have in the past. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, I do feel the same way.
Yeah,
I'm looking at the bull. I mean, if we're just tossing out names to keep an eye on, we know some of them, right? We know Riley Martin is getting outs in AAA. We know that he's struggles with command and control, but he is Rule 5 eligible, or is he minor league free agent after this year? I think he's just Rule 5 eligible. I think
yeah, I
he's
believe
just Rule
so.
5.
One more.
So you got Riley Martin. We've talked about him for hours on this podcast. Jack Neely's on the 40-man roster, working his way back from injury now, and has struggled mightily this season. Um, Nick Hull is a guy that has been pretty good this season, getting a lot of swings and misses. He's been on my radar for a while. Mitchell Tyransky has been like outrageously solid. I posted the other day about Mitchell Tyransky where he had one outing where he gave up 4 runs and like
That's about it.
two. Yeah, it was like a few outings where he gave up two or gave up one, and then the rest of his out at 31 outings where he hadn't given up anything. So Mitchell Tyransky's been really, really strong. The stuff maybe isn't quite as gnarly as some of the others, but like he's getting outs in Double A. So just worth mentioning some dudes. We're throwing some
If I
names
had
at
to
the
sell myself
microphone.
on big league relief contributors, I think I would have to go to South Bend and see guys that I see closer to having that breakout. Somebody like Jackson Kirkpatrick, like the stuff gets a little better. Luis Rujano, the stuff gets a little better. Luis Martinez Gomez, having a really nice start there. There's one more that was in my head.
Braden Reisdorf before he got injured but that was kind of a different type of guy though. That's more Braden Reisdorf's more in the Mitchell Tyransky grouping rather than a Jackson
Sure.
Kirkpatrick LMG grouping.
Kenny Perez maybe comes and throws a bunch of strikes next year and takes off. Like those guys are their stuff's a lot more firm and the shapes are a lot more sort of like in the early stages of looking like big league pitches than the double A guys who like if you're getting outs on 76 mile per hour sliders, like I'm happy for you, but I'm not gonna believe that you're getting to the majors. If you're getting outs with the splitter that LMG's getting in South Bend when lately, now you have my interest a little more, but it would seem that he's pretty far off from the majors. Guys in South Bend bullpen are pretty far off from the majors. But like go back to like Manny Rodriguez. That stuff can change quickly when a guy
Yeah.
just has an offseason, gets a double A assignment, and if he had like one thing go really good in the offseason, it can all happen really fast. So if I'm looking for contributors to the bigs, I'm looking more in South Bend than Knoxville, which tells you that it's a little thin.
Yeah, dude, pitching in the bullpen is just so strange. Drew Gray,
Yeah,
reliever
sure.
in Chicago next year. How about that?
I mean, there's a world.
All right, let's go to the next question. We got multiple people ask about this general topic. I've labeled it as which pitching prospects do we like the most in the lower minors. We got questions from Carter asking specifically about Justin Florentino. Dane T was asking about Nazir Muley. Bill Rofer was asking about just the Myrtle Beach starters in general, starters in general. We got Cubs account asking for thoughts on Justin Florentino, Jenry Rojas, Kevin Camacho, Arian Rodriguez.
Dude,
Uh,
shouts to our listeners just getting deep in the bag on these names. I love that.
what honestly, yeah, I just absolute nerds listening to the show. I'm so proud. I'm so proud. It's incredible. Yeah, we we got a question about Kevin Camacho.
Yeah.
Asking us to address Kevin Camacho. So I love it. I think that I'll kick it to you next, but Arian Rodriguez is it kind of stands out in a weird way from this lower level minors conversation because like
Yeah. Feels like an upper level arm.
he's not a lower levels guy. Like
Yeah.
he should be in Knoxville tomorrow. He should be as you guys are listening to this, hopefully announced that he has been promoted up to Knoxville. So like let's kind of remove him from the conversation.
Okay.
same kind of deal that we've been talking about all season long with him. Like the stuff isn't like outrageously good. Like I think it's a tick down from last year, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Both the slider and the fastball, but the results are like way better this year compared to last year, and it's probably because he doesn't belong in South Bend. So,
Right.
yeah, let's go to remove him from the conversation. Who
Okay.
else? Who else you got that's catching your eye? I know that we've talked a little bit about Justin Florentino. Is there anybody you want to talk about him? You want to talk about somebody else?
Well, I want to group together Florentino and Jenry Rojas, who have been, probably the best pitchers in the system over the last month, have had just tons of success, and I see them really similarly. They're two guys that they're almost sidearm pitchers. Like they're really low arm slot guys, throwing fastballs in the low 90s, pretty good sliders that are more around 80 mph, even a little slow, a little firmer for Rojas, a little slower for Florentino. Both can throw a changeup a little bit, like just executing at really high levels, like way more than A ball hitters are accustomed to. I view those guys really similarly. Florentino's had more success this season, like a longer track record of it within the year. I kind of like Rojas's stuff just a touch more. Florentino's slider, just like I don't see a pitch that looks like that, like in the upper levels of any
Yeah.
system, like that gets a ton of success. It's just this big loopy, like it's almost like it's like a if you turned a curveball on its head.
Yeah, yeah. It's a typically when you're like talking about a slurve,
Yeah,
it's like the combination between the curve and the slider, obviously, but the slurve a lot of times is like fast, like it's a fast breaking ball, and his is not like it's
yeah,
that general like shape, but just instead of like the typical slurve being like a 87 mile an hour, like an
Mhm.
86 mile an hour pitch, it's a six or it's a 76 mile an hour pitch. It's like
Right.
it's weird. I mean, I think that Baseball America wrote Florentino up and said that the spin rate on that is astronomical, and that
Okay.
doesn't surprise me. Like it looks like it
Yeah.
is, but it's also 76 miles an hour, and the fastball is more high 80s than low 90s, and I,
I guess if we try
he's
to say
executing well.
slurve and sweeper together, we get sleeper, and
Mm.
but that's kind of what it is. It's just it's
Yeah,
a slow sweeper is really
yeah.
what sort of the definition of that pitch is. So I don't know. Florentino for me is like he's interesting if everything gets a little more firm. Like
He's
if
Luis
he,
Devers. He's Luis Devers.
yeah, sure,
Different. I mean, different
yeah,
pitch
no, I like that.
mix, but he's Luis Devers. I think that Rich Biesterfeld might have been the first person to point that out to me.
Mm-hmm.
Devers did it with a changeup, a really good change. Remember Luis Devers' changeup? That thing
Yeah,
was so damn good.
yeah, it's fun.
Um, but a similar thing where Devers was like right around 90 miles an hour with a plus changeup.
Mm-hmm.
Florentino is right around 90 miles an hour with this weird but good slider. And like they're too good. I described Florentino to somebody recently as like he looks like a college draft pick that was assigned to Myrtle Beach and is way too advanced in terms of like his execution and command, despite having below average stuff, and he just doesn't belong in Myrtle Beach. And
Yeah,
so, um, yeah, I know that the results have been like really good, and like I love to see those results. Uh, but I want to see him do it at South Bend. I want to see him do it in Double A because I think that
yeah,
he can keep doing it in South Bend to a certain degree. Not what a 1.5 ERA. I think that's what Florentino has.
right.
Um, but I want to see him do it up in even Double A Tennessee. Kevin Camacho kind of catches my eye a little bit, honestly. Bigger body guy.
Yeah.
I I think that the fastball and slider are both pretty decent. I need to get better readings. Do you have a reading on the fastball velo
No,
for
I don't think they've
Camacho?
played in a good one that I've seen at
Yeah,
least.
but it looks like it has a little bit of late life on it to a
Mm-hmm.
certain degree. Camacho catches my eye. I don't know. There's several. I mean, even if you're bumping up Nazir Muley, we've talked about quite a bit, right? I know that the or sorry, Dane asked about. Actually, he said anything and everything you have on Nazir Muley.
I mean, one
Um,
thing I'll say about Nas is that this season is going to get painted as a really massive disappointment, and I'm going to say like 100 times probably between now and the start of next season. I think he's way better this year than he was last year, even though the results are saying otherwise. Like the stuff profile has taken a step forward for me. I still feel like there could be good things coming for him next year. It's just like he's gotta throw more strikes in counts where he's behind. He just when he's behind, he loses at bats so easily.
Dude, it's so weird. I watching Muley last year. It was like I was watching his stuff, and his stuff looked pretty good last year. Like the fastball was running up there, the slider flashed from time to time, but he just wasn't getting any swings and misses. Like he was, I think, like second worst in the entire organization behind Caleb Killian last
Yeah.
year in terms of the number of swinging strikes that he got. And this year he's cranked that, he ratcheted that up quite a bit. He's getting way more swings and misses, but now he's just like missing the zone
Yeah.
so much, and like you said, getting behind in counts. And I, I I don't know.
Tyler, but when we talk about Schlafer, like he's a guy that was in this sort of position, had some hope attached to him, had a really hard time getting out of Myrtle Beach for reasons sort of both his and the organization just sort of being jammed up at that time. And then like when it clicks, it clicks. And if you have the stuff profile, then you leave yourself the ability to have a breakout. So Mulet's always going to sort of be on a breakout list for me. Where a guy like Alfredo Romero, who's having some nice success in Myrtle Beach, like that's a arm that needs a lot to go right for him to have
That's
success
true.
at the upper levels. Like a guy who's executing really well, but um, I'll go back to like JP Wheat earlier in the season. If JP Wheat gets healthy, he's the most
Mhm.
interesting guy on this list because
Yep.
he can just do things with the baseball that no one else can do.
I
Ethan
outside of
Flanagan, like we need
yeah.
to see Ethan Flanagan at a higher level because I think that he's pretty good. But it's sort of hard to be able to separate what low A is like right now from his results.
Yeah, agreed on Flanagan for sure. I mean, as until I find out what JP Wheat's injury actually is, I still have him ranked as the highest rated pitching prospect among all these like low A guys outside of Arian Rodriguez again,
Yeah.
of all these guys. So it's just he looked pretty damn good. So all right, let's move our attention over to the hitters. The question is, who is a hitter that you would like, or sorry, who is a hitter you could see rising several levels between now and this time next year? I think this question was from Northside Soundtrack. Basically, who are these kind of quick risers that we can expect between like in the next calendar year or so? Who's that riser? The first name that comes to mind is a draft pick that we talked about last episode, King Kepley.
Yeah.
Like him as a prospect or as a major league quality player or not, he's in Myrtle Beach right now, and I could absolutely see him going up, starting the year next year in South Bend, getting promoted up to Tennessee pretty quickly. I don't know if I can expect an Iowa call up to AAA by the
Could
end of
see it
next year,
though.
but I was gonna say I don't think it's the most ridiculous thing to expect. So like
Yeah.
we could see King Kepley go from Myrtle Beach to Iowa in one calendar year. That's the first guy that absolutely comes to mind for me.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, someone like Cole Mathis, who's just getting healthy in Arizona, if he, probably goes back to Myrtle Beach, but could be a guy that comes out of the gates next year and sort of instantly shows that he actually should be in Double A. And then who knows if there's a power breakout, like you can keep going. It would be a name like that, I mean, you could go to the college names drafted this last year and almost go down the list. Justin Stransky at catcher, if good things are happening with the college draftees, I think the Cubs are going to be willing to move those guys up. Where the Myrtle Beach hitters that are having a bunch of success lately, like the Cepedas and Limpoys, like those guys are probably more earmarked to spend the majority of next season just at South Bend, no matter what. That's just sort of the way the ladder works.
Yeah, other guys that kind of fit into this category are the guys that we talked about last week that are due for a promotion up to end
Yeah,
the season, and if they don't get a promotion, then that's kind of cheating a little bit. But like that, those kind of guys, right? If Christian Hernandez stays in South Bend to end the
right.
season, if he doesn't get called up, and then stays in the organization past the Rule 5 draft, whether that's being added to the 40-man roster or not, he could end next season in Iowa because he goes from Knoxville up to Iowa in one season. So like there's your three levels from right now, technically
Sure.
speaking. Um,
Two
there,
more would be like
yeah,
the guys that are going to come over from the Dominican Summer League next year and that we think will be in the Arizona Complex League. But if they have amazing spring trainings, maybe they go to Myrtle Beach. And then if they're the prospects that they could be, maybe they finish the year in South Bend, which is Juan Tomas and Juan Cabada.
hmm
Those guys are talented enough that, they have the massive sort of potential. And, we didn't mention them in the top 100 discussion. There is, of course, those like 3-5% scenarios where they just absolutely blow up, and that'd be really fun. And I think they fit a little bit in that discussion, and I think they fit in this one too.
Any prospects currently in Double A or lower, I guess, that you think have a shot of making the bigs next year? Jefferson Rojas, obviously the top prospect there in Double A right now. I don't really see him getting a run. I mean, if he goes crazy, if he goes nuts, obviously, but I look at that roster in Double A in terms of the prospects that are there, and not a whole lot of those guys. I mean, you got Rojas and Pedro Ramirez are kind of the top prospects in
If
Double A right now, and they're both super young, and I would be surprised to see him in the majors.
I mean, say there's a world where like Ben Cowles gets DFA'd this offseason, James Triantos gets picked in the Rule 5 draft. All of a sudden, like there's
Yeah.
Pedro Ramirez is sort of the next man up, and so he definitely fits. I think BJ Murray's having a really good season. He's old for the level at this point. He's had a bunch of struggles every time he's ever touched Iowa, but um, he's got legit power. He can help in multiple positions. He's a switch hitter. He's the kind of guy that like if you needed somebody for 15 days, I think you could do a lot worse. And I mean, a guy like BJ Murray is basically rookie of the year for the Brewers. So who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. Brett Bateman's the other guy I want to throw out. Brett Bateman might start the year back in Double A next year. He might start the year in Triple A as well. But he's a guy that, I mean, he's got the fifth outfielder profile in the major leagues. That's kind of the ideal scenario, like the ideal outcome for Brett Bateman long term in the major leagues. And so, with that being his profile, what's to stop the Cubs or any other team from calling him up to the majors to be a fifth outfielder in 2026 versus in 2029? You know what I mean? And so that's the other name I kind of want to throw out into this mix, but not a whole lot of dudes as far as kind of the big breakouts below AAA.
I feel like, these last three questions have sort of highlighted a thing that we've touched on a little bit, but not outright said, which is that like the weakest part of this system right now is the depth. Particularly as you get close to the majors saying who can help this team. That's not really the strength of the system right now. The strength of the system is that they have potential impact players like right at the top at AAA waiting for turns at bigger roles, and that's good. Like I mean, then that's probably honestly more helpful to the Cubs organization where they're at than if we were able to list,
Mm-hmm.
10, 12 players that might reach the majors next year. Like the 2026 Cubs aren't going to need 11 players from the Knoxville Smokies roster to help them next year. They would rather two really good players from AAA. But when we have these discussions, I think it's worth saying that Cubs farm system has trended down over the last few months because they just haven't quite been able to like lift guys to from guys that can perform well in the minor leagues to like having skill sets that look actually sort of translatable to the majors.
I need to train myself a little bit because I've spent the last when I started podcasting about Cubs minor leaguers in 2019. And for a good stretch of this podcast, the Cubs have had really good depth, like in
Yeah,
terms of both just straight up having good depth, but also really good for this podcast in terms of let's name some dudes that might break out. Let's name some dudes that are fun.
right.
It's been really great for that. And when you spend the last year and a half trading away 8 to 10 dudes who are ranked between 10 and 20 in your organization, you don't have a whole lot of depth to make up for that. I mean, like they've traded a lot of those dudes over the past two deadlines and off seasons.
Who's a guy that like I was never that high on, that I would have a lot of appreciation for if he was in the system now would be somebody like Yohendrick Pinango, who is a guy that another organization liked enough to trade for him, has performed really good in the Blue Jays organization. Just not a guy like I thought the Cubs system was deep enough that he wasn't really in the mix for me very much.
Yeah,
If he was in the Cubs system now, I would be like finding ways, he would be a part of our conversations a lot more often. And not just like him specifically, but players like him. The Cubs like that middle tier of prospect that is interesting enough that you can say like, oh, he just needs this one thing and then he actually is an interesting prospect. They just don't have that many of those types of guys.
It was Alfonso and Rosario who was part of that, who was that Eli
Yeah.
Morgan trade, right? Like that's a
Yep.
good example. I saw someone post something about Yohendrick Pinango. This is probably about a month ago, and they were like, "Look, Yohendrick, because now he's up in AAA, and so there's a lot of Statcast data to associate
Yeah.
with Yohendrick Pinango." And they're like, "Look, Pinango's hitting the ball super super hard. He also hits for a high average. Like, why is he not this incredible? I mean, and he is, to be fair, like he's having a much better year this year than he had any time in the Cubs
Mm-hmm.
organization. But they're like high average, plus hits the ball super super hard, and he gets it in the air quite a bit on the pull side. Like, why is it not all melding together?" And I was just sitting here like that was the last 5 years of my conversation, man. Like like we knew Yohendrick Pinango hit the ball hard. Like we watched it
Yeah.
happen on a daily basis, and it just couldn't all like fit together. And so
Yeah.
but yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's a really good example of that. So, all right, man. I think that's all we got for this episode. You want to plug your Substack? You had another great post on Monday that people can go read, right?
Yeah, another edition this Monday. It's called Five Cubs Things on Substack. Just trying to keep it nice and simple. Um, talked about how Yency Almonte's looked with the South Bend Cubs this week, which was the only minor league thing we hit on. I've been looking for another minor league thing to write about. I'm gonna find something for next week that's a little deeper dive. Um, but yeah, it's been really fun to sort of dig in on the major league team and find some interesting things. And I'd love people check it out.
Yeah, for sure. You can find him over on social media at Cub Prospects on Twitter. You can find me at Out of the Vines on Twitter, on Blue Sky. You can find both of us chatting over on the 1060 West Discord channel on the podcast, or sorry, on the Prospects channel. If you're looking for an invite to that, if you're not already there, reach out to Bryan and he can hook you up. But in the meantime, we will be back in your ears in one short week. Thank you guys so much.
Please go Cubs.